Welcome to the Crime Dawg Podcast with your host and content creator, Johnny FIORICA, who is the youngest girl out of all the FIORICA sisters. Ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Hello. Welcome to the Crime Dawg Podcast. I'm your host, content creator Johnny FIORICA, along with my trusted sidekicks. First on deck, 20-year veteran, retired Rochester Police Department, legendary street cop, undercover cop, SWAT team member, rounded out his career in the RPD homicide murder unit, David SIMPSON. David, welcome to the pod.
Welcome, boys. Happy St. Patrick's Day week. Green.
David, I brought the clap back for you, David.
Thanks, buddy.
Next up, 2.5-decade veteran. Served the Flower City. Served on both sides of the rock. Genesee, Clinton, Lake, you name it, he's done it. Lead negotiator for the RPD hostage team. Self-proclaimed alpha male and self-proclaimed Hall of Famer. Jason Blanchard, welcome to the pod.
Thanks, Johnny. I'm happy to be here. Just getting ready to celebrate our St. Patty's Day episode, wearing the green, and most importantly, wearing the Crime Dawg Pod green apparel, which happened to be free. So that was even better. The best green ever. Kept it right in my wallet.
The swag is hot, though, Jay. I like it.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, I got to be honest with you guys. The T-shirts came out good. I'm not happy with the hats. I've been, Jay, you've been distributing some of that stuff for me. I've been a little busy, but I appreciate you distributing some of the Crime Dawg Podcast apparel to a few different arenas around the city. I got mixed reviews on it, I'll be honest with you. Just if people are wondering, yep, everyone knows I own an apparel company, and yes, it's called Crime Dawg Inc. We will have an apparel line eventually. Trying to get our feet underneath us with this podcast first, and then we'll worry about the apparel later. Guys, so I got to tell you, so we did it the other night, and my wife, who's, by the way, 10 times funnier than I ever thought I was, she looks at me and dead serious. She's like, and I thought she was busting my balls, but she was serious. She's like, you end the pod the same way, which she loves because it's an homage to my brother Frankie, my brother-in-law Frankie. And she's like, you should probably explain that to the people that are listening because they might think that you're a D-bag. And I'm like, well,
they would be right.
I go, well, the people that work for me for 30 years definitely think I'm a D-bag. So it's not a far stretch. Anyways, we end the pod, or I end the pod every time saying thanks for listening to Crime Dawg Podcast. We hope you stick with us for future episodes. But like my brother-in-law, Frankie Grassi, says, if you can't make it, who cares? Well, I say that because we have guardianship over Frankie. Frankie's special needs. He's the cutest 55-year-old man you'll ever see. He's nonverbal. He doesn't speak, but he's got a personality for days. My wife takes care of him full time. I do that sign off for him. It's an homage or paying tribute. So please don't be offended by me saying that. It's just my way of saying how much I love my little guy. So that being said, my wife's like, you should probably clear it up because I don't want people thinking that my brother. And so anyways, that's the reason for it. I'm not going to over-explain it, but that's it.
And that's the last time we'll allow her opinion on the show. Short of that, we're good to go.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. You know what? Jay and her have a very tumultuous relationship at times.
Right. It's aggressive.
It's very
it's
aggressive.
Not surprising to me.
Yeah. She usually gets the better, but that's
true.
Anyways, now that we got that cleared up, guys, we got some good feedback. We're getting some comments, and I know I've said this before, but the crimedawgpodcast.com. Shout out to our producer Danny Agnew for building us a cool site. Danny's got a feedback section on that site. You could leave a video message, you could leave an audio message, you leave a text message. We've been getting some. We hope you give us more. But some of the feedback we've been getting either on the YouTube channel or through our website, we've been getting a lot of feedback. The cool part is some of it's been negative, which we welcome. We welcome anybody's opinion. Danny usually responds. He's got our passwords. He's got he's got the hooks in social media. He usually responds. It's something polite because he's a sweetheart of a guy. And he says something to the effect of, hey, thanks for replying. Thanks for listening. We welcome all sides here. We welcome everybody's feedback, which is 100% true. We've said that from the beginning. And usually he, or sometimes I'll respond off my personal accounts, and he'll say something like, hey, if you want a link to come on, you could express those opposing views that you have. So literally, like we've always said, full disclosure, we welcome anybody and all opinions on this podcast. So if people have them and they think that we're going down a road or we're incorrect, you could email us, text us, video message us at any of our platforms. But if you're really, really hungry to express your opinion, shit, man, Danny will send you a link and you can pop on your email and you can come on this little 3-panel with us. We'd really appreciate it. Guys, you've been reading some of that feedback, David?
Yeah, I have. You don't let me respond to it, so I just read it.
Yeah. You to keep with your hockey reputation, you're kind of in the penalty box for that. Jay, you agree with that penalty box analogy?
That's 100%.
I mean, Jay should be in the penalty box just with me. There should be only 2 people responding. It should be you and Danny.
Yeah. So that's key. I think. Well, you know what? Let's make a decision, Danny. I could see you in a panel that's off camera. I see you give me the thumbs up on that. I think me and you should just stick to responding to people because we just. But I got to be honest with you. So, anyways. Not to babble, but some cool stories came out of some of the feedback we've been getting. That some of them were negative, and that's cool. I was prepping for a pod last week. My phone rings. It's one of our jail guys. It's Tony Russo calls me, and his guys were watching the pod, and I'm assuming they're a little younger, and they're talking about it and showing him. He's like, "Hey, I know Johnny," and he picks up the phone. He calls me, and they're in the background. It was really super cool. So shout out to our MCSO jail crew. Want to say thanks for listening. So we appreciate it, Dave, Jason, and I appreciate you guys listening. And just a shout out to you, Jay. You cut your bones in the jail. You were there for about
8 minutes,
right?
8 minutes.
I was there. I managed to make it through the jail academy for 16 weeks. We were the first 16-week academy. We actually weapons qualified. And I was sworn in on a Thursday and resigned on a Friday and started with the city on a Monday. But that being said, I will tell you, since you brought it up, at the time, Superintendent Squires was the super there. And I had to go in and tell him that I was, as they say, in the words of LeBron, taking my talents to South Beach. I was taking my talents to the city of Rochester, and they couldn't have been better. Probably happy to dump me, but they could have been. They could have been nice.
Thank God.
And the statement as I walked out the door was, you'll always have a home here in the jail. And I got to tell you, those guys, we know a ton of them, right? My best man at my wedding is retired now, is a jailer, Chris Carey. And those guys, you want to talk about a brother and sisterhood, right? Those guys are thick as thieves in there, and they're salt of the earth dudes. So those guys are definitely good men and women in there.
Yeah. Sure. You talk about the superintendent for decades, and you know him too. Major LaPerry ran a show there for decades. He was the man in the Monroe County Jail. He was the major in the jail, but his number one title that he ever had, he was my Little League baseball coach, which is huge. He coached me, and John Jr. retired from there. His son, he was a captain, John Jr., great guy, comes from a great family, Major LaPerry, John Jr., actually, believe it or not, and Jay, you guys probably know them too, right? So the Spampanato brothers came out of the jail. Their dad helped Major LaPerry coach our youth our youth Little League team. It's pretty funny seeing how all this shit comes full circle, and I'm effing old now and retired and blase. But anyways, but they're a bunch of great people. Spamp, all those boys. Jay, your kryptonite, speaking of the jail guys, your kryptonite. He dominates you as well as the four walls of the MCSO jail. Christopher Galena, I believe he's lieutenant in the jail. You and him always got stuff to say,
I mean, I guess my only comment would be, the day that lieutenant's exam was offered, I'm assuming Chris was the only one that showed up. If they made him off of that list, I'm not trying to start any trouble. So when you hear this, I mean, I'm just asking a question. I don't know that to be true, but I feel like, in order for him to make that illustrious rank of lieutenant, it might have just been, the choice between him and the wall, and he got the nod that day.
Ooh. I'm going to stick up for him. I steal cigars from the guy. The guy on the golf course always has a good rope for me to smoke, so I'm not bad-mouthing nobody there.
So let's just do the math here, David, and you and I know Common Core. I've expressed this many times. I got a 520 on my SAT. I'm not that smart. So there's 3 of us, 33 each. That's 99%. 66% of this pod thinks the world of Chris. Only one guy doesn't. What do you think the problem is?
I think we know what the problem is. Great guy.
Yeah. Great guy.
And I mean, I want to go out on record too, Johnny, that I get roped in, and by roped in, I mean I only want to see his lovely wife for our Christmas gathering every year, really because that's why I show up, because she's a sweetheart. But it's amazing how every year Galena seems to have to go to the bathroom when the bill comes, and he skips out on the bill as usual, and I'm not surprised by that.
Well, he knows you made $300,000 or $350,000. He probably wants you to cover the bill. Poor guy's working in the jail, killing himself.
David. First of all, we know that that's not accurate. 350 is a little bit of an overstretch. However,
349.
Right.
Yes,
right. But again, Galena's never met one to let a bill slide by. So, we appreciate the fact that he's still got his first communion money.
Well, he's going to enjoy this pod too. Shout out to Chris.
I've enjoyed it as well.
Yeah. Guys, we got a pretty cool episode. I hope Danny allows us to go and stick with the title of it. We're going to call it the We Told You So episode. And we're gonna talk about 2 things that are in the recent media. One was real recent. One was last week. One was in the semi-recent past that we're going to talk about first. But it's the We Told You So episode. During our first episode where we addressed the ER police officer involved shooting with our brother, Brad Steve, we explained that there's always someone somewhere that always somehow, some way has an issue with a police-involved shooting, even though our boys and girls may have done everything by the book. In this particular one, we're not going to so much talk about the actual shooting itself. We're going to briefly discuss it, but we're going to get into some other things where the We Told You So came in. So relative to the first We Told You So, there was an officer involved shooting. The suspect, Todd Novick, he was shot by Rochester police officer Daniel Celeberti, New Year's Eve 2023, a few months back. He attempted to elude police, running away. He pulled out a gun, subsequently was shot. It was later learned that the gun was a replica gun. Novick eventually succumbed to his injuries. He passed away. So right here is where we're going to insert the body cam footage that was released to the media, and then we're going to come back. We're going to talk to you about a couple things.
He is running northbound. Hey, stop! Drop the gun! Hands behind your back! Hands behind your back! Other hand behind your back!
So, folks, please don't mistake your feelings for facts. And what I mean by that, if you pull out a firearm or what is perceived or believed to be a firearm, the onus is on you when it comes to law enforcement. You have to accept the consequences for your behavior. Sometimes those consequences, unfortunately, and I mean that, unfortunately, they end up in death. Officer Celeberti and other cops that are involved in these incidents like these don't wake up in the morning and go, hey, I hope this happens to me today. It never happens. Trust me, the 3 of us, we have literally close to 100 years experience between the 3 of us. Not a one of us woke up and wished that an incident like Officer Celeberti was faced with on December 24th, 2023 happened to us. And unfortunately, he was part of that. And he handled it with dignity. He handled it very well. So my point is, Celeberti did what he was trained to do. He protected the community, protected himself, and he definitely protected his brothers and sisters out there. So now why are we talking about this? So we're talking about this because Rochester, New York, Police Chief David Smith came under some scrutiny from city council members for having his staff make minor cuts to the body-worn camera footage, okay? So this is the part where we say, we told you so. So just to be clear, Chief Dave Smith, he used the phrase public viewing, and for the record, it's not illegal for a police chief to make edits or cuts in a body-worn camera footage. And there's a plethora of reasons why they may do it, as opposed to releasing raw footage to the public. It could be for legal ramifications. It could be to save the family some heartache. There's a shit ton of reasons why it may be edited or cut. Chief Smith did not have his staff make those cuts to evade public scrutiny. He did it because it was a measured, sensitive decision for the betterment of everybody. Betterment of the family, of the suspect's family, betterment for the community at large. You know, there's some things that we don't think the community should see. You know, this is real life. It's not CSI Miami. But here's what Chief Smith had to say. Take a look at what Chief Smith said.
The raw body-worn camera footage was made available for city council members to come and view. The mayor himself came to the 6th floor, viewed the raw body-worn camera footage. Our video ends where it does, based on my decision, because I watched that, and quite honestly, I could not bring myself to put the last 20 seconds of this man's life up for public view on the internet and YouTube out of respect for the family.
So as you can see, the interesting part is that city council knew Chief Smith had shown the raw video. The raw video is the uncut, unedited, anything that was involved in that body worn. He released it and he showed it to the mayor. He showed it to his staff. He showed it to the people that needed to view it, right? So his articulated response was relative to the viewing public. And the raw video also had to go to the New York State Attorney General's office, because I don't know if you're familiar, but the last 2-3 years, the New York State Attorney General's office has a part where they have investigators police-involved shootings that end up in death, like this incident involving Officer Celebrity. Guys, we've said it.
Or Johnny, or any incident that ends in an in custody death.
Okay.
Involving the police.
Right. Okay. So good. Thanks for the clarification, Jay. That's good that you said that. I didn't want to get hate mail. But so guys, like we said, there's always some facts, something said. I mean, you had this thing, Celebrity did everything by the book. Negative comments, right, David? They always got to come. People just can't let sleeping dogs lie. And it's just amazing that the chief, who was very articulate in that video on the reasons why he did what he did, always got to say things to make things negative, right?
It's the same assholes every time. I don't even like to give them that much credit. It's the same people complaining about anything and everything that the Rochester Police Department does. And I think there's people that objectively look at what the police do on a daily basis, like this incident, and try to see both sides of it and maybe have some questions. And and like I've always said, the questions are fine. It's the individuals that no matter what is done, no matter what Chief Smith did, no matter what this officer did, it's going to be scrutinized. If that same officer had let that guy run and it was a real gun and he had shot somebody or grabbed someone around the neck and put a gun to their head and shot somebody, they would have criticized the police officer for that. So certain people you're never going to appease. And, you know, you have to play to the majority of the audience, not the insanity outliers. And I think these individuals, who again, I don't even address their names, are the insane. You have to let them shoot it off, and you can't give it that much credence. What Chief Smith did was, as he articulated, was 100% within his right, He provided everyone that needed to have the full footage, including the Attorney General's office. The mayor viewed it. Everyone that needed to view it got to view it. He was preserving the family's feelings and their emotional state after the incident, which, how can you fault that? He wasn't trying to get over on anyone, and sometimes you can't play to the insane.
Let sleeping dogs lie. There's going to be times, and we've said it, right? We've admitted it, right? We've said there's going to be an incident that we're going to have to talk about or critique where, oh, shoot, that officer, wherever, whether it's locally in upstate New York or in Nova Scotia, we might have to say, hey, man, they're wrong, right?
Well, and we've talked about this too, right? By virtue of what I still do, you guys retired. We've talked about when incidents happen that are still topical and ongoing and stuff that, I'm gonna believe me, that I'm never short of an opinion, right? But I'm gonna purposely put myself in the timeout box and not not give my opinion. Not that it there's a time and place for everything, and it's not now. So that's kind of where I stand. Other than saying, right, and it goes without saying, and I think everybody knows, right, that unequivocally myself and you guys, we all support the men and women out there in law enforcement, right, and we'll continue to do that. And like you said, if they're wrong, we'll have conversation and dialogue about that too. But I'll put myself in a penalty box in this one and not offer a ton of insight.
Yeah, we appreciate that, Jay. You're 100% right. That's your home field. That's your home field advantage, especially you being active and still being there. It's very, very articulate, well said. We told you so. And in the second incident, that we told you so block, we talked about bail reform in episode 4. And I know people are probably like, Jesus, these guys, all they talk about is bail reform. Well, it's a very huge issue for us. But on February 29th, MCSO, the Monroe County Sheriff's Office in New York State, they locked up a dude, Shalom Matthews. He was arrested for attempted kidnapping, attempted sexual abuse, for holding a St. John Fisher University employee at knife point. He was arrested. He was released. I believe he posted bail. And then the very next day, he's arrested by a town police department in Brighton, New York, for stalking, for sending sexually explicit messages to 2 victims.
Over a prolonged period of time.
Right. So let's play that news clip, Danny, so the viewing audience can see what we're talking about.
Good evening, guys. Sheriff Todd Baxter releasing a letter today entitled "The Portrait of a Crime Victim," saying the woman targeted in an attempted kidnapping at St. John Fisher was let down by the criminal justice system.
This had such potential to be a lot worse, and by the actions of the victim, it wasn't. But that's not always the case.
19-year-old Shalom Matthews is accused of trying to kidnap and sexually abuse an employee at knife point in her office last week. Matthews was arraigned, brought to jail, and then posted bail. The next day, he was arrested again, this time by Brighton police in a separate case, charging him with stalking, accused of sending unwanted and sexually explicit messages to 2 victims.
I'm sitting home comfortably this weekend, and I'm thinking about that lady that defended her own life. I'm thinking about those other stalking victims that tolerated this probably for years, these actions. And they finally see what it could look like at the other end. We still do not have the ability to detain someone just long enough to make sure they're stable, long enough to make sure there's a security plan for the victims, long enough to make sure that he and his family have resources to keep him under control, so he doesn't recommit another crime. And that's what we lack. We clearly lack a dangerous standard in New York State, and this is a case of a dangerous standard.
Sheriff Baxter hoping this case on a university campus will push lawmakers to act.
So if you listened, the news, Wham! Channel 13, they do a good job reporting. They told you what happened relative to the synopsis that I gave you prior to us showing you the video. Then you had Sheriff Todd Baxter, who's the sheriff for the Monroe County Sheriff's Department in New York State, in Rochester, New York, Monroe County. And what Sheriff Baxter said, he's 100% true. And if you listen to his words and even an interpretation on some of what he's saying, it's something that we've been saying all along about bail reform. And I don't think Sheriff Baxter, and we're not saying get rid of bail reform altogether. You got to have a second look at this bail reform. You have to take a second look. So if I hold my hands together and here was bail reform before And now here's where it's at right now. Right here is horrible. Right here may not have been so good, but this is horrible. We need to somehow come in the middle and get in the middle and meet in the middle and talk about it. But let me just say this about the We Told You So. I'm going to talk real briefly about the videos from Chief Smith and Sheriff Baxter. That's what leadership looks like, folks. Just like Chief Smith explained to City Council, Sheriff Baxter, they both gave measured, articulated responses. They were polite, they were articulate. Two law enforcement leaders with a level-headed response to super sensitive topics. Guys, David, you specifically, I know that you've been articulate in past episodes relative to bail reform, and we recognize that you've said it before. You're like, hey, I'm not saying get rid of bail reform 100%, but you're saying there's got to be some happy compromise. Something's got to be done, right?
Yeah, I'm just echoing what Sheriff Baxter's been saying all along. And, you know, if you watch the things you've said, he's calling for a dangerousness aspect to the bail. He's asking for the same thing the federal judges are allowed to take into account when they decide on bail for someone. And that's not only are they going to appear back in court, are they a flight risk, but is there a dangerousness to this individual, to the community? And that is something that we do not have in New York State. And that's something that Sheriff Baxter and myself and a number of other people have been banging the drum, bang, 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 bang. And these liberal politicians are not hearing it. No one's saying to get rid of bail reform. Dangerousness clause needs to be on the table for judges to have that tool to make a decision based on someone either committing a series of crimes like 35 petty larcenies in a month. There's a dangerousness to that individual because they're committing the same crimes no matter what the police do every time they're let out. There's a dangerousness aspect of that. If you offer that ability to the judge to be able to set bail based on that, some may, most may.
Yeah.
Same thing with this guy. If there was a dangerousness aspect, and I know bail in the St. John Fisher case was asked for by the DA's office, and they asked for a much higher bail, and that's a whole separate issue. The judge actually set bail, but it was extremely low. So that's a different entity in itself, but Sheriff Baxter has been calling for a dangerousness clause, and I've echoed that as well, and that's what I've clamored for. That would be a huge way to move towards the middle.
Yeah, and Jay, we all talked about it, right? We got to tweak this thing. I mean, we can't keep talking about this. This is, I mean, anybody that's being rational has to understand there's got to be some tweaks to this thing. This is getting crazy now, man.
You know, if you recall during the press conference, Deputy Chief Fowler, I think, was the point person that gave the conference for the Sheriff's Department initially when the arrest was made. And he said that the victim, now let's not take this lightly, he said that the victim basically, her actions saved her own life, right? She saved her life. She fought and she pushed this lunatic out of her office, locked the door, and called 911, right? This woman's actions were heroic.
Good
right?
for her.
At 100%, right? 100%. God bless her. I don't know her. God bless her. I hope she.
I want to know her. Good for her.
Her actions saved her life from the quote of Deputy Chief Fowler. Now, you know, relative to this bail reform, what just absolutely drives me nuts, and it's disgusting, right? Here's the disgusting part about this, is that we clearly, based on this bail reform and our actions, have forgotten about the victims. Because these victims are now being victimized again when these people are being let out with no consequences awaiting a trial, right? And that's not a fault of the law enforcement, of the DA's office, of any of those mechanisms in the criminal justice system, right? It's the ability by somebody making a choice and an elected official, a judge, saying, I'm going to let this person out. And we have taken these victims and we've put their feelings and their thoughts and everything else on the back burner. And for some reason, we feel it's more important to address the suspect's concerns. and what we should do with the suspect and how the suspect should be treated with pending felony charges.
The trauma of the victim has no place.
Thank you. It's the definition of insanity. What are we doing? Take a step back, legislators. Take a step back and let's utilize a little common sense and let's look at the bigger picture. For whatever reason you came at bail reform, I'm not going to say you were cynical. You probably came at from a good place, but now we see where we are and we see that your actions have grave consequences. And as a result of that, people are walking out of the door, out of court, and released on their own recognizance, released with low bail, whatever it is, they shouldn't see the light of day until the trial, especially stuff like this, right? If that was our sisters, our wives, our girlfriends, doesn't matter, a family member, I would be incensed. I'm incensed now that family has to deal with that kid being let out and can wander the streets freely until trial comes up. That's a joke. That's a joke. Get it right. We need to get it right. People's lives are at stake.
One thing I want to say to Johnny, I started to jump in, but the dangerousness clause, how do you present that? How do I pass that off to someone that is a liberal or Democratic politician that was before in Albany and had bail reform? How do you present, hey, we just want dangerousness to be considered? How can that possibly be controversial?
Well, if you listen to politicians, they all talk about the suspect, the defendant, the guy that got arrested, right? And they talk about, and they've talked that they're saying that statistics, there's a disparaging number of black and brown people that get arrested and can't afford the bail. And we talked about that before relative to bail reform. And then the secondary thing was the prisons are overcrowded, blah, blah, blah. But what they're failing, especially in the jurisdiction that we all have policed for many, many decades, not only are you talking about the black and brown community relative to the defendant, but in most instances, I'm not saying all, but in most instances, the victims are black and brown. And they're not even advocating for their constituents. Like I said, we call it like we see it. It's not a racial statement. If you look at these incidents where there are victims to some of these crimes, you got to look at the victims. And to be honest with you, it doesn't matter what color the victim is anyways. But when they're advocating, they always got to mention the race of the suspect or the defendant when they talk about bail reform, which is their way of pushing those right buttons, right? But the thing is you guys are right. The victims are never talked about. They're never talked about during bail reform, ever.
Yeah, well, 98% of my homicide victims when I was in homicide were minorities. So
there you go.
We'll leave it at that.
Stat to the bank. So guys, that's it, right? We told you so. We told you so about Chief Smith and him having some scrutiny relative to the things that he did regarding the officer-involved shooting. Yes, we told you so. Sheriff Baxter came out, talked about this incident relative to bail reform. Guess what? We told you so. I know we talked about some things really quick, but folks, if you like this episode, give us a thumbs up. Share it with as many people as you can. If you have any thoughts about this episode, leave them in the comment section below. If you want us to address anything in the future, just make a comment, video comment like we talked about earlier, a text message, statement, any way you can get it to us. You can leave feedback in our feedback section on our thecrimedawgpodcast.com. But hey, thanks for listening to the Crime Dawg Podcast. We hope you stick with us for future episodes. But like my brother-in-law, Frankie Grassi, says, if you can't make it, who cares?